Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon when you are watching this. I am Tara Casey. I'm the director of the Carrico Center for Pro Bono and Public Service at the University of Richmond School of Law. And I am so excited today to welcome Naomi Turner. She is the Development and Volunteer Associate at CAIR Coalition, the Capital Area Immigrant Rights Coalition. The Carrico Center has been a proud partner of CAIR Coalition for the past number of years in its operation of advocacy services to those who are being housed in ICE detention centers in Farmville and Bowling Green, Virginia. Although because of COVID-19, the look of this advocacy has had to shift to some more remote opportunities, the participation of volunteers and the support of the community are nevertheless still desperately needed. And this is a way for you to be able to help from the comfort of your home until we can be in person again. So Naomi, thank you so much for joining us today. And I will turn it now over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us here, hosting CAIR Coalition and myself. This is a great partnership, so I really do appreciate it. And then I also want to thank everyone who clicks on this video and takes a little bit of time to learn about CAIR Coalition and our volunteer opportunities and programs that we have running right now. I'm going to go ahead and start our training by sharing my screen. I do have a PowerPoint prepared, so I'll go ahead and just do that now. All right, perfect. All right, thank you. So as was mentioned, my name is Naomi Turner. I'm CAIR Coalition's Volunteer and Development Associate. So I do oversee all of CAIR Coalition's volunteer programs and do all of our trainings and things like that. I have been with CAIR Coalition since 2019, so I'm really excited to be here today just to tell you guys a little bit more about us, what we do, and kind of how you can get involved. So just to get started here, I want to start with just a little bit of an overview. I always like to start with an introduction. That's the piece we're doing now. Then we'll get into who CAIR Coalition is and what CAIR Coalition does. We can then take a minute to kind of contextualize that information by going over just some impact, statistics, and significance. And then we'll round out the training by going through the 3 volunteer opportunities. The first is our detention hotline. Then we'll have our interpretations and translations team, and we'll finish it out with jail visits. Last slide then will just be how to get involved, and we'll answer any questions. So the whole video should be about 30 minutes long, but we can go ahead and get started. Okay. So CAIR Coalition, or Capital Area Immigrant Rights Coalition, is an independent nonprofit that was established in 1999 with the mission to ensure equal justice for all immigrant adults and children at risk of detention or deportation in the DMV area. So we go about this work through a couple of paths. We do provide direct legal representation, so all of our attorneys on staff do have an individual caseload. We also work on know your rights presentations and kind of legal education. We do impact litigation, advocacy, and we do enlist and train other attorneys in our network who are interested in providing pro bono or low bono services. CAIR Coalition has 3 main programs. The first is our detained adult program. So our detained adult program serves 5 adult detention facilities, 3 in Maryland and 2 in Virginia. The 3 in Maryland are Frederick, Worcester, and Dorchester. And then in Virginia, we have Caroline County and Farmville. Ultimately, these are some statistics from our website, so I do apologize if they are a little dated. But the United States government detains approximately 400,000 immigrants each year. Of those 400,000, about 1,600 end up in the DMV area. They are then detained by ICE in the DMV while they await for removal proceedings to continue. So this is a process that can take months, but in many cases, it does end up taking years. So while people are detained in the DMV, that is where our detained adult program steps in. They intake about 2,000 individuals each year. And then of that, they end up representing or supporting about 25%. So our detained adult program then works with those 25% or that 1,600 more largely to provide information, provide any support that's possible, and then in some cases to actually represent those people. You may be familiar that there is no right to appointed counsel in immigration court. So many of those people who don't end up with direct representation do end up representing themselves. To kind of assist with that, we do provide pro se workshops which usually have an attendance of about 1,000 people each year. And in those workshops, we just kind of go over education and support so that people feel and are more prepared to take on their cases in court. I do also just want to point out here that our Hotline volunteer program is in direct services to this specific program and this mission. So due to COVID-19, we really rely on our hotline to connect to people, to find out who's recently been detained, and kind of go through the intake and follow-up process. So if you are interested in helping with pro se meetings or helping people reach legal services, I do really recommend our hotline for that. Our second volunteer program is our Detained Unaccompanied Children's program called DUCS. DUCS provides legal services for about 1,000 detained minors each year who are detained by the Office of Refugee Resettlement. So the Detained Adult Unaccompanied Children's program primarily works with people who are going to be either released locally in the DMV or are at risk of really prolonged detention. So they tend to provide Know Your Rights presentations kind of weekly as people get detained. They also do legal screenings and consults. So they'll provide intakes and follow-ups and kind of do that connection work. Any initial immigration court appearances, our DUCS program will also work on, especially before a case has been placed with a pro bono partner. They'll also then take part in legal referrals, or, as 18 comes about, they can do post-18 planning for anyone who is looking for kind of support in getting connected to the community and integration and things like that. So that's our Detained Unaccompanied Children's program. And our third and final program is our Immigration Impact Lab. So our Immigration Impact Lab is actually our first concerted appellate impact litigation project, and they actually work on the Fourth Circuit. So their mission is really to reduce the disproportionate legal injustices people in detention are facing. And they go through this mostly through impact litigation. So they're really working on that systematic change. As you can imagine, this means they have been very busy over the last several years, working on things like immigration bans and working on bond, so that when bond is granted to an individual, it is something that is more approachable or more likely to be payable than some of the bonds that were being granted. They've also been really busy working on COVID relief efforts so that people who are of heightened risk of contracting COVID can get released from a facility rather than stay and go through that. For the sake of kind of knowing our volunteer program and opportunities, our opportunities are primarily focused on that detained adult program. However, if you are interested in getting involved in our DUCS program or our lab program, and you are fluent in another language, I do recommend joining our translation and interpretation program. Currently, we are really at need to have anyone who isn't able to translate, any Dari, Pashto, Wolof, and Farsi languages. So if you speak any of those languages, or someone who does, I would love to connect with you and talk a little bit more about what that opportunity looks like. So that is who CAIR Coalition is. So we'll go ahead and move on to our next slide here. Impact, statistics, and significance. I always like to share a little bit of statistics just because I think it helps contextualize the impact of our volunteer programs. I also like to have this slide because it gives me the opportunity to give a huge shout out to all of our current volunteers on the hotline and in our translation and interpretation team. As I mentioned earlier, we are incredibly dependent on this remote hotline, and having volunteers who are there and able to staff it really helps us to be able to assess situations, connect people to the correct resources, and kind of keep the personal connection piece alive. I also, for our translation and interpretation programs, remote work has kind of really changed the program. It means a lot of people are providing interpretations over Zoom or over phone calls, and I really do appreciate people's ability to be flexible and work with the new system. It's also resulted in kind of shorter, timelines for projects. So a huge shout out again to anyone who's taken on a bigger project and then gotten it back to us in kind of a short time frame. So in the last 6 months, our volunteers on the hotline have put in over 1,300 hours. So that's a lot of hours on the hotline, and we're incredibly grateful. Over those hours, they've answered more than 8,000 hotline calls. This is also really big. One of the things that this has proven to us is even with reduced capacity in the facilities, the amount of hotline calls have remained pretty consistent. So this still remains a resource that people are actively using and something we want to make sure continues to have the full 40 hours a week opening that it currently has. Also, in the last 6 months, we have translated and completed 236 projects, and that is in over 10 languages. So incredibly proud of that. All of those documents were then either used as resources for people in detention, or were submitted as part of case filings or support for country conditions and things like that. So again, really huge outreach, really helpful, and has supported a lot of cases over the last 6 months. That then takes me to our first hotline, or our first volunteer program, the hotline. So the hotline is, I mentioned it earlier, so it connects those 5 adult detention facilities with CAIR Coalition free of charge. Basically, the people in detention can dial an extension and be connected to the volunteer on the hotline. Once the volunteer is connected with them, they'll kind of get some basic biographical information, their name, a number, and where they're detained. And then they can kind of take them one of 3 routes. You can connect them to their CAIR Coalition lawyer or point of contact. We can connect them to their private attorney. So if they're working with a law clinic or something like that, we can easily transfer them there. And then our third option is we often transfer to a third-party immigration services provider. This is usually an embassy or a consulate, but we can transfer there. Currently, there is a 4th option. It isn't long lasting, but CAIR Coalition is currently working on a survey for people in detention that just kind of outlines legal advocacy. So we're kind of trying to get a sense of priorities and involvement within the facility, kind of looking at relationships and how to build that out. So currently, if someone calls on the hotline, we can transfer them to that survey. That also means that if you are interested in helping to conduct this survey, you are more than welcome to sign up. You can volunteer on our website, and I will connect you to the person running that survey, and we can kind of work through that as well. Generally speaking, on the hotline, our volunteers can deliver follow-up messages from an attorney. So if there's any updates on the case, or if they have upcoming questions, or they're reaching out about letters of support or appeals, the volunteer will be able to communicate those messages. That also works the other way. So if the person on the hotline has questions or concerns or is looking for information, the volunteer can connect that to the attorney and kind of take those messages and communicate them. The volunteer can also provide any case updates or changes, and they'll also be asked to provide information about CAIR Coalition's intakes. We used to actually perform intakes and follow-ups as part of the hotline. However, due to remote work, we have since suspended that, but that is likely something that will come back when we return to in person. So if you are interested in helping conduct intakes and follow-ups, I do recommend joining the hotline. The process will remain pretty much the same when we do go back into the office, and then you'll just be able to learn the intakes when that comes back, and we'll be able to work that piece in. The third and final piece of the hotline that I do think is pretty important is the personal connection piece. So for many of our callers, this is the only hotline call they get a place in a day. And I think it can be really important to have someone on the line and to also make sure that our hotline is as accessible as possible. I like to tell the story about a caller who was detained and spoke only Portuguese. In the time he was detained, he had been unable to really talk to someone else about what was going on over the last couple of weeks in his case. He did one day call CAIR Coalition, and it just so happened that our volunteer on the hotline also spoke Portuguese. So they ended up spending the first whole 15-minute call just going over kind of what was going on and what was happening. The caller then called back after it got cut off, and that's when they actually connected someone to legal services and got connected to the attorney in those pieces. So that is another piece of the hotline that I think is really important, and I want to make sure I emphasize. Switching to a little bit more logistical information about the hotline, it does run Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So this is business hours. The hotline is stacked in 2-hour shifts. So 9 to 11, 11 to 1, 1 to 3, and 3 to 5. So if you do have a conflict, that's okay. Let's say you had a class that gets out at 1, but you would still like to take the 1 to 3 shift. We can be pretty flexible there. You would just have to send me an email letting me know you're running, 5 minutes late or you have this other commitment. We'll just make sure the other volunteers on the hotline are up and ready, and then you can kind of sign in as you settle into setting up your station. You should also know that there is no language requirement for being on the hotline. In many cases, Spanish can be helpful, but we do keep one Spanish-speaking volunteer on the hotline at all times. We do receive a lot of calls in English, and we do receive a lot of calls in other languages. So if you don't speak Spanish, that is totally okay. You are still more than welcome on the hotline, and we could definitely use your support. The last bit of information here is that there is a mandatory one-time hour-long hotline training. They are given on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. and Fridays at noon. So if you're available to attend one of those and interested in the hotline, that's perfect. If you'd like to volunteer on the hotline but aren't available at one of those times, that is also totally okay. Please feel free to reach out to me via email at naomi@caircoalition.org, and we can set up either a one-on-one training or we can open another training for people who aren't available at those times to join as well. So that is all our information about the hotline. So now I'm going to transition to our second program, which is translations and interpretations. So ultimately in this program, what we're asking is for volunteers to translate documents that will then be used in a client's case. So in a lot of cases, these are, news articles for country conditions, declarations, letters of support, birth certificates, things like that. But we may also ask volunteers to translate resources for people in detention facilities, in which case this could be step-by-step instructions on how to call the hotline. It could be updating the latest intake form or our latest LOP language, something like that. We do also ask for volunteers to occasionally provide interpretation services. So currently this is 100% remote, so it would happen like over Zoom or over a phone call. But we would ask a volunteer if they could read a declaration back so that a client can kind of hear the declaration, or to help provide interpretation services for psychological evaluations. So if that was the case, we would provide all sorts of background information in advance and kind of connect you to the doctor who would be performing the study, kind of help settle everybody in, but then you would provide those services as well. Our most common ask is currently for Spanish speakers. However, we have seen a huge rise in the need for Wolof, Farsi, Darsi, and Pashto languages. So I know I mentioned that earlier, but really, if you are interested in providing translations or interpretations, we definitely have a need. So please feel free to reach out to me at naomi@caircoalition.org, and I will update you on kind of what's available and what we're working on right now. There is no certification required to kind of prove your language fluency. We just ask that you are strongly proficient and fluent. If you would like to see some documents and templates, I'm happy to provide them to you. You would then kind of look at the template and think, okay, can I translate this? Would I be able to have this conversation? And if so, you are totally all set and we can go ahead and put you on one of these projects. More logistically, the way this program actually works is you join a listserv, and then every week or so, you'll get an email from me with an outline of all the requests. So it'll have the name, the page number, what kind of the general type of document is, when it's due back by, and then any content warnings. You would then be able to respond to that email and let me know which projects you're interested in or what works for your schedule. I would then place those projects with you and you would just get them back to me by the due date, and they would then be used in the case or given to the client or any of those pieces. Neither of our volunteer programs, translations and interpretations, or the hotline have a mandatory minimum commitment. So you don't have to take a request every week, or you don't have to be on the hotline, every week. We completely understand at CAIR Coalition that you guys have busy schedules. So if you can volunteer for like maybe 3 weeks, but then you have to stop for midterms or finals or something like that, that is totally okay. And we would look forward to working with you kind of when that has passed. So it's really great if you kind of need some flexibility in your volunteer schedule. Both of these programs perfectly work with that setup. That then takes me to my third and final program, jail visits. So our jail visit volunteer program has unfortunately been on pause since March of 2020, but we are hoping to bring it back online in probably the spring of 2022. The way the jail visit program worked is volunteers would go to facilities with CAIR Coalition staff. They would then provide intakes and follow-ups with detained individuals, or potentially provide information about the detention process and legal rights. So you might end up giving, the Know Your Rights presentation to some of the people in detention. And then from there, you could kind of have, sometimes the language fluency can be helpful, but currently none is required. So if you don't speak another language other than English, you can currently sign up to join jail visits when they are reinstated. And if that is to change, I will definitely communicate that before we bring the jail visit program back online. For the jail visits, you would sign up to visit one of the 5 adult detention facilities. Since you guys are in Virginia, it makes sense that it would probably be Farmville or Caroline County. But then you would then work through kind of the full day commitment. So this used to be like a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. time commitment. I think that in part had to do with transportation time. So if you did live closer to the facility you were visiting, that day may be shorter. But that will also be subject to change kind of as we reinstate this program. Also, as we reinstate it, I would be happy to give you more information about logistics. So COVID-19 safety protocols, language fluency, how transportation is going to work. I think we all used to carpool, but that's all still up in the air. If you are interested in joining our jail visit program, since it is really great direct legal services work, I do recommend that you sign up to be a volunteer on our website and then just say that you're interested in jail visits. And as more information comes available, you'll start getting emails from me just kind of outlining the changes and the timeline. So those are our volunteer programs, which then takes me to my final hotlines or my final slide. Our impact and how to get involved. So hopefully one of these 3 programs caught your eye and you'd be interested in participating. If you are, please go to our website at caircoalition.org/volunteer to register as a volunteer. In your registration form, you will be able to list any languages you speak or what areas you're interested in, or if you have any skills that you think might be particularly helpful. So if you're really good with computer systems or phone systems, we may ask for your help on the hotline, things like that. And that'll kind of get us started. After that, you'll get an email from me just kind of welcoming you to the team and going over our programs and inviting you to any trainings you might want to take. If you are interested in the hotline, you can directly sign up for a training from our website by just going to caircoalition.org/upcoming volunteer trainings. And then you will see all of our hotline trainings for the foreseeable future. So even if you're busy this week, you could sign up for one next week and we can get you started there. If you have any questions about anything I've mentioned or are looking for any more information, please feel free to reach out to me directly at naomi@caircoalition.org. You can also check out the CAIR Coalition website to find out ways to donate, to find out information about our pro bono team and pro bono partners, or to join our team, whether you're interested in like a staff role or an internship or something like that. But that is it. That is everything I have. Are there any questions on kind of this project or these programs?
So Naomi, I do have one question. You know, I always have questions.
Of course.
So one of the questions that I have is that when folks are interested in getting involved, there's a hesitation because it may be into a space that they're unfamiliar with. You know, they haven't volunteered before, they haven't engaged necessarily with CAIR Coalition or with this type of work before. Is there a way for them to reach out or have any type of peer mentorship with other volunteers or support from you if, you know, for the first time that they're going through this, or any opportunity to shadow existing volunteers in their work before they go into the volunteer space on their own?
That is a great question. For the hotline, there's a lot of extras. There's a lot of possibility for that. As far as I do spend a lot of time with volunteers kind of setting up for their first shift together or doing some practice calls after hours, things like that. For translations and interpretations, it is a little bit harder, but I do recommend in that case, maybe signing up and then just kind of lurking on the listserv for a little bit. You can kind of get a sense of what the projects look like and turnarounds and things like that. And then of course, there's lots more structure in the training for jail visits. When we're back in person, we'll also have the opportunity to shadow the hotline, since we will have a couple of hotlines in person and a couple remote. But for now, that is offline, since obviously we're all socially distant. Great question.
And if somebody is interested in volunteering, but say, for example, this month is right now really, tight. So can they go ahead and sign up to be kept in the loop somehow so that they can become engaged later?
Great question again. It is a rolling sign up, so you can sign up at any time. So please feel more than free to register. You'll start getting an email from me, and then you can always put in your registration form if you're like, hey, I'm swamped this week, but if you could add me to the listserv on this date, I'm more than happy to make a note of that, and I will just reach out to you directly and then add you as you're ready.
And I do have just one more question. Is that,
Mhm.
I know with CARE Coalition, y'all are based out of DC, but you're working with immigrant detention centers that are spread out beyond
Yes,
there. Um, can you share a little bit of who else you partner with, especially in Virginia? Because I have a feeling that a number of folks who will be watching this video are engaged with other organizations who are working on immigrant advocacy. And so
absolutely.
it's always a great way to kind of see how the dots are connected.
Yeah, awesome. We do work a lot with the colleges. So obviously, University of Richmond and University of Virginia. We've also done a lot of work with Virginia's Planned Parenthood team. They're doing a lot of work on kind of engagement and how to get people involved there. We also, of course, have worked, I think CASA is in Maryland, but I'm thinking of another one. Unfortunately, the name has lost me at the moment, but we do have some partners in that area. And if you're interested in finding out more, I'd be happy to send you an email with that information as well.
Thank you so much. And it is true. I mean, we have lots of wonderful immigrant advocacy groups, both on the local level, statewide level, national level. And just to share with folks who may be watching this, this is one piece of a larger immigration puzzle. But oftentimes this is the one where or many immigrants, this is unfortunately sometimes their first contact with the United States when they are being detained. And so this
Mhm.
is a great opportunity to not only help these individuals, but also, I think, represent what's best of our community as they're going through such a challenging time.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Naomi. I just do want to point out right here, if you have any questions, Naomi has included her email address as well as her link to the website to get more information as well. We will be posting links to get involved attached to this video. So hopefully right now as you're watching this, you'll see a couple of hyperlinks right below that'll take you to information on the programs and how you can get involved. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Naomi. I appreciate this partnership and I appreciate you taking the time to talk about it with our prospective volunteers here in the Central Virginia area. And hopefully we can show up and participate and be of service to y'all.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you hosting and involving us this week.
Great. Well, thank you all so much and take care.
All righty. Bye-bye.